Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another GovTalks. It is such a pleasure to be able to kick this off again, and my honor to discuss this, topic, which truly has been on my mind for a long time, which is the the pursuit to digital excellence through digital maturity. So without further ado, as Yen was very kind to introduce me, I'm Nikhil Deshpande, Chief Digital and AI Officer with GTA, and I was just looking through some of the names, and most of them I've interacted with, had the pleasure to know you and speak with you. And for those who I have not, I look forward to knowing you and working with you. So let's jump into this. So as we can all attest to that we at some point have embarked on different kinds of journeys, and I want to talk about our journey towards digital maturity. So I just like to draw an analogy that kind of like encapsulates the challenges and the triumphs as we encounter mountain climbing. So through this slide, as we can see this showcasing several of these mountain peaks, and we are reminded of a lot of these daunting, journeys that lie ahead of us in the realm of technology, information, and think about each of these peaks representing maybe a critical initiative by your organization, by your particular division, and why it may seem overwhelming when we look at the overall landscape of it. It is very essential that we get to actually prioritize and work through these one by one. So if we were to, put this in context of achieving digital maturity, just like a seasoned climber assessing the terrain before, kind of just jumping in and starting to climb, the planning of the route, which, makes informed decisions at each step, we must really kind of approach our digital transformation with a clear and, informed strategy. So thankfully, one of the national organizations that we work with, align with, and look forward to for them being a think tank is this National Association for State Chief Information Officers, also known as NASCIO. They publish a list of the top 10 priorities for state CIOs. So for this year, this list was published last year in December. So for 2024, as you can see, the top two are digital services and artificial intelligence. Now, AI being three, but the top position is tied, and that has not happened in any time in the recent history of NASCIO. But as you can see, cybersecurity and digital services, digital government are a tie, and these are not just like all 10 of them are important, but the one that bubble up to the top are important and also urgent. And that they're urgent because there is a significant gap that needs to be addressed. And just like any mountaineer, he will tell you, to climb to the top and to reach the summit, you're going to need a lot of experience and some really good decision making. So this office, this particular organization deals with, thankfully, all of these. But we're going to be specifically talking about digital services and AI. So let's jump into that. So just imagine standing at the base of this towering mountain, right? Like eyeing that summit up there. So to reach our summit essentially represents like achieving our goal of digital maturity. So this journey is going to demand a lot of preparation, strategy, resilience, and it's going to take way more than just grit to start scaling to the top. It takes planning, strategy, backup plans, and sometimes rerouting as per the most immediate challenges. So for that, we're going to lean on some of our strategic initiatives. The first one, as you all heard, GovHub being one of our flagship products out of this particular office. It's really kind of like the very first strategic foundation initiative, right? Because as a state, we need some sort of streamlined and efficient content management system. Otherwise, we have seen in the past where every organization had a very different experience with their constituents, and that really doesn't gel that well. it just creates a very confusing experience for our constituents. So by consolidating our content and eliminating redundancy, it just makes it a lot easier to access the information quickly, efficiently, and thus lightening our load as we start our climb. So as Ian mentioned, GovHub is essentially powered based on Drupal. And we have really designed this with you all, with agencies, with the needs. And that's one big differentiator between something that's just off the shelf and something that we have actually developed to meet our needs, because this is open source technology. So taking this strategic path, one of the things that we recently upgraded to was Drupal 10. And for those who didn't even realize that you were upgraded to Drupal 10, that was exactly our intention. This was more of a stable version, more protected, supported version of Drupal. There are certain improvements that come with content modeling, block management, the menu taxonomy systems, but as far as GovHub is concerned, making sure that GovHub is protected and supported, really the strategic technical upgrade of Drupal 10 was a big deal. Right after that, obviously, there were certain modules in Drupal 9 that were not going to be supported, and that's the reason why we wanted to make sure we don't, fall too behind, and did a timely upgrade for Drupal 10. The other key part is not technical, but something that affects our constituents, which is content, right? So as you can tell, the technology is just one piece of your digital presence. The content strategy piece is really important because it takes so much effort on our content team, and you will hear this from Will and other content team members about how they partner with agencies and work on a cohesive content strategy and a more effective way of presenting your information. The next upgrade was something, again, some of you may have noticed, some of you might not have, is we replaced our Solar Search platform with Google Custom Search, and purely in the quest to improve the quality of search results. And the overall new engine also reduces a lot of time and maintenance costs. Again, this is something we are very confident that this new function will serve you and your constituents way better. Something that's upcoming in this roadmap is an upgrade to CK Editor 5, and I'm not going to say much about it other than the fact that it's just aimed at improving performance, a better authoring experience for our content managers. And we have Donna and Jasmine later to be discussing this with you all. The next strategic initiative trying to go up the summit is something that is recent, and some of you may have been exposed to this or heard about this. This is our design system. I'm really happy to say Georgia is probably one of the very few states to actually have an official design system. This is built for our sites and applications, and it's a comprehensive system that ensures consistency across all the websites and applications, and essentially it builds trust with our constituents. So because once they start going through a certain process after consuming information, once they start transacting, if everything changes on them, that just creates like a lot of suspicion. So this is like truly a toolkit that built for designers and engineers across agencies. So if any of you know that you are modernizing your applications, existing applications, or building new applications, please let us know, because we have Orchard, ready for you to implement on the front end. And there are so many benefits and features that Orchard provide. That the key feature is being accessibility. And this is designed with accessibility in mind. And as you probably all have learned, heard, if not, I'm happy to tell you that as of last month, I believe like just April 24th, the Federal Register published the Department of Justice's final rule updating its regulations of Title II of the ADA Act, which is the federal act that requires all the websites and digital properties to be compliant. It used to just be up to the federal agencies, but now they have made sure that it requires all the state and local governments to provide the exact same accessibility levels for individuals with disabilities. So this is now required by federal law, and Orchard really kind of gives you a jump start to be able to achieve that. Something again that you may have seen is a Bloom upgrade. If your website looks a little different than it did before, that's because now that we have Bloom rolled out as of last year, October, it's an exciting design refresh on GovHub, and it's a theme for our Orchard design system for websites. It just creates more modern, aesthetically pleasing feel, and it's been about 5 years that we built GovHub, and we were up for a refresh that needed some UX changes and obviously some of these accessibility improvements. So having said that, I want to move to the focus of the topic that I really wanted to kind of get into, because these are all the achievements that we, as this team, have done in the past year or a couple of years. But AI is new. AI is brand new, and as you all know, not a day goes by before we hear something about AI, right? So I don't even know if we probably should be visualizing the same terrain when we talk about AI. It really should be something like this. But for the sake of no distraction, let's just assume best weather conditions as we start scaling up. I want to start talking about essentially mentioning GTA's commitment to making sure that we have AI systems, protected, integrated, and a plan to make sure we use AI responsibly. The quality of the services, obviously, with all the things that AI has to offer, will be exponentially different. It will be a lot better. But also, we also want to make sure that we have our workforce augmented to maintain a good AI aware posture, and people working with AI tools know exactly what the boundaries and the guardrails are. So we're really optimistic, but also cautious at the same time about the role that AI systems are going to be playing going forward, right? So end of the day, we want to make sure that anything that we do within AI, as far as anything affecting our systems, really focuses on the need and solving a problem, and it respects everyone's right to privacy, dignity, and social contributions. So always, geared towards following state and federal laws. So one of the first things that GTA has done is has put together a governance framework to study, monitor AI systems developed, deployed, employed, procured by any of the agencies today. And then based on that, we'll be refining certain policies, publishing standards and guidelines. We already have AI language on the GTA website. If you go, you'll be able to find some of the existing published policies and standards as of last year, December. But really, we are looking to develop a statewide guide for all the governing bodies to align with, and that requires us to publish several elements like an ethics playbook, something that addresses some of these complicated AI implementations where decision making is going to be key in making sure how services are delivered. As of a couple of months ago, we formed a council for artificial intelligence, which is a diverse group of leaders across state agencies, educational institutions, and some of the private sector leadership to provide that needed direction and oversight on a responsible use of AI in our state. Now, obviously, training is very important. So AI training is going to be a critical focus of GTA. And right after this talk, Deborah is going to be talking about all the things that we are working on for our AI training, because literally it's not a nicety, it's a necessity at this point. So we will be also sharing some of the best practices of AI training. The next thing is we're setting up a lab, which is more kind of like an innovation pad designed to serve as a central hub between state agencies where we can tackle some business challenges and collaborative explorations. This is going to be aiming at coming up with some innovative solutions, including some proof of value in a GTA controlled environment in a given sandbox, regardless of the technology that you'll be using. So GTA will be seeking to establish a public-private partnership in reviewing these challenges and developing some proof of concepts, proof of value, and some pilots. So there's a lot of work happening within AI. But looking at AI and speaking with a lot of people, I realized the need to maybe, just kind of go over some of the things that I see from a perspective of, me doing a lot of research about what's happening across in the world of AI. And for some of you, if this is unknown information, please excuse if I'm repeating something. But I'm going to go to this particular infographic that was published by the Center for Digital Government. And this really is kind of like their radar of the white tech landscape, where AI is a category and a lot of these exponential changes impacting the tech landscape. So I want to share some of these highlights that I've been seeing and learn from my peers across other states and think tank organizations like the CDG. So what are the things that are immediately in the purview, and what are the things that are probably like 1 or 2 procurement cycles away? So in the immediate purview, as this laid out, the initiatives that are impacting government right now, really kind of like the AI LM-based data insights where managed service delivery is concerned, data compliance, privacy, generative AI, BYO AI, right? I mean, like those are like real things that are affecting right now. And I mean, obviously the biggest talk of town at this point is Gen AI. And we're not only thinking about enterprise models, but also like what the workforce may benefit from, right? And then just moving out to like maybe 1 or 2 procurement cycles out, we are seeing like a lot of acceleration of the AI-driven workforce, not just recommendation engines, but also, very hyper personalization that AI can actually allow. So think about, if you all have used ChatGPT, as and when you interact, like whatever you kind of get is very different from otherwise what you would have to go and Google things, right? So I really want to focus on the impact of Gen AI that it's going to have on the work we do and how we do it. But before doing that, I want to just kind of clear a couple of concepts. Again, for those who know this already, please bear with me. So just looking at like the overall pure definition standpoint of what the challenges we see is there's a lot of confusion between Gen AI and AI. But if you look at here, Gen AI really is kind of like a subcategory of a subcategory, right? So this somewhat creates some challenges from a definition standpoint because Gen AI is kind of equated at the macro as the other AI, but the desire to regulate AI truly is towards regulating Gen AI. And that's kind of like, creates some friction around the legislation that we have seen earlier this year. But the traditional systems are primarily still using the traditional AI, I would say, which is primarily analyzing data to make predictions. And going a step further, when Gen AI actually started creating original content rather than just finding or processing something, it's actually creating content just like it's been trained on. That's when everyone woke up to what Gen AI is actually capable of. So if you want to think about Gen AI's capability, I would say think of it like a baby, right? So like we don't really have any sort of like an official training structure for babies, right? I mean, we don't even know when they learn things, but they do learn because we speak around them. We speak in a certain way, we behave in a certain way, and they're just absorbing that. And all of a sudden, right? Like sometimes they start speaking their first words to the delight of the parents, and then we start, slowly seeing the development when they start talking like full sentences and stuff. So from a GPT perspective, like this is the generative part of the GPT, right? So this is not a rule engine. These are just like billions and gazillions of these neural networks that are created, and like they exchange information and they process, and then they're basically trained, right? So they're trained by like a mind-boggling amount of data, and it's primarily from the internet sources. And essentially what it does, it guesses like what the next word will be based on what it has learned and what he has heard. And the parameters are like really automatically tweaked. There is like nothing that anyone can do manually because it's almost impossible. But when we know that, like this is happening, we can only just leave it to the neural network trying to teach itself. At some point, there has to be some human training, and that's what happens with these GPT models, right? So there's a lot of like human training that happens where like humans essentially spend thousands of hours in making sure that these models are actually creating better like relevant outputs, and also like having some sort of like a governance structure to it. So for example, like if you ask ChatGPT like how to make a bomb or how to rob a bank, right? Like it's not like it doesn't know how to do it, but it's not going to tell you. And that's exactly where the human intervention comes in. It's just going to be like, I'm sorry, I can assist you with that, right? So it's not like it doesn't know, but it is pre-trained to not help you with something, and it's pre-trained to help you with everything else. And that's kind of like the P of ChatGPT comes in, is the P is the pre-trained model of it. But think about it, like once all of that training has happened, then that particular model is frozen and is ready to use. What that means is like it's not going to learn anything new unless there is an absolute intention to update its knowledge. So that's the reason why it's called pre-trained, and it's not doing continuous training. Although we have seen some of the newer models, they are continuously being trained. But since I'm talking specifically about ChatGPT, that's really kind of like what the factors are. So now, your baby is trained, and suddenly your baby is a genius, right? So it knows everything. It's really trained and smart. But I want to think of, these AI models, these super intelligent AI models, as more of a, you know, Einstein as your coworker, right? So it is in fact like literally, um, it's a combination of every smart person you ever interacted with or existed probably in this world, because it just has so much information all into it. And there are certain models that, it's not just like a generic model, like ChatGPT just knows everything, but there are certain models that can actually take like a certain specific role of expertise in a certain domain. So maybe, think about, a coworker that is truly focused on government policy and law, a coworker that is a historian that knows, a lot about, the history of the domain that you're working on. Maybe a customer-facing social worker who knows how to answer questions, is trained in natural language processing. Maybe, a coworker who is more of like a historian from a inception perspective of the organization, or just knows like all of these historic significant facts and being part of that, right? So there's so many ways of looking at it. Or a coworker who's more focused on future-facing trend watching, and how equating how that's going to change things, how that's going to affect things. So there's so many ways to be using these models. What has changed though from last year? Because I spoke a little bit about last year, also showed how a certain Gen AI model works. But what has changed is that suddenly we went from a text-to-text model to a multi-model world, multimodal world. So as you can see up here, it's no longer just text to text. It's text to image, text to image to text, image to 3D, video to 3D, text to audio, text to code. There's so many ways that now we can actually have these LLMs. They're actually now going to be multimodal models. So it is going to be LMMs instead of LLMs on top of that. So point being is that at some point, we can have any kind of input and can request any kind of output. So just to give you an example, if you are a user of ChatGPT 4, this is a really good example where like, someone just like doesn't know, am I allowed to park here or not? Like, how do I process all of this? So that person just took a photo and just asked a prompt basically, and ChatGPT said, yeah, you can park up to 1 hour starting at 4 p.m. Right? So these are like some of the things that are easily possible within like seconds. We don't even know where things will go going forward, but what we are seeing are these like immense possibilities of us creating things, with very little effort. This was something I tried to create, but maybe that's.
Hello, everyone. I decided to crash this GovTalks keynote to remind you that AI will be in anything and everything. That's all. Enjoy the rest of the sessions. And remember, I'm always watching. Just kidding.
All right, so now that we kind of know that, like, all of that particular thing took me less than 2 minutes to create. Just had to feed a script and pick one of the free versions of whatever the service models were available. But think about like the potential of someone creating a training series, or there's so many different ways of. So from an adoption perspective, what are the big areas of intersection of Gen AI and government, right? Because like we could geek all day looking at like what the capabilities of AI, but like where does it actually affect us? Where does it actually come? And kind of where does it actually involve us? So I kind of see it as like a three sectioned way where we talk about the regulatory aspects, the use cases, and some of the arising issues, right? So speaking of like the regulatory aspects of it, I think it was in October, we saw that the White House released this executive order by President Biden, publishing, essentially federal guidelines for safe, secure, trustworthy use of AI. Now, essentially, this was pretty much contained within the federal realm. It didn't have much for states and local governments, but what this did was this was the catalyst that created like a flurry of states issuing executive orders through the governor's offices, and somewhat like codified the approach for responsible AI. So we kind of saw where a lot of like the governors started publishing their executive orders. There were a bunch of states proposing bills. There were a lot of folks that were creating committees. And one of the most common bills, I was tracking bills across other states, and one of the most common bill that I saw was the deepfake bill. And very few states actually had that into the law, but there was essentially a lot of activity happening because as compared to in 2023, when there were just about 40 bills across all 50 states for AI, in 24 we saw somewhere around like 350 bills introduced, or maybe close to 400. And this was just a snapshot in the midst of the legislative session, but back then about 32 were enacted, primarily between California and New York. As you can see, more and more states are now truly focusing on legislating related to algorithmic bias, discrimination, automated employment decision tools. So people are getting aware of what AI can do, right? So one of the things that the federal level White House, Biden, again, had an executive order for agencies to appoint a chief AI officer, right? So we want to make sure that like a lot of these new roles are embedded in the way we do things. So that brings us to like, what are some of the use cases, right? So just taking a look at some of the most common use cases, like I talked before, if I were to know how our government agency is using Drupal, I would just go to Google and Google it up, and then I would see some of these things coming up, some of these search results, and then I have to basically synthesize a certain opinion out of that. But if I just go to ChatGPT and I ask the same question, I actually get like a much more opinionated, much more curated response, and that probably will be changing some of the dynamic, from an external use case perspective. So we, as agencies that are responsible for content, obviously we'll have to think about this, right? Because is this going to affect anything from a website perspective? I mean, AI still needs some fodder from somewhere, and that's exactly where websites come in. As like we offer that information, the consumption style will be changing. But maybe the way we offer, the way we kind of start thinking about our content is also something we should be. And I think Mary later is going to be speaking to that about how does this affect our content generation, and how should, again, that maturity be shown in the way we present content. Um, Most of the kind of low-hanging fruit use cases are these chatbots turbocharging, kind of where we just program in the past like an FAQ, but now with natural language processing, a lot of these websites are publishing chatbots, right? We also seeing agencies moving beyond just the extensions for natural language translations. Now we are using AI for that, for different reading levels and formats. We have AI bots actually helping 911 dispatchers. We have certain mission critical aspects of like AI used for body cams across that has shown vision recognition, and how it also changes maybe some of like the behavioral culture across different organizations. But then we get to something called as the App Store dynamic equivalent, of where agencies can create their own GPTs and have their own trained systems out there, right? So these systems could be trained on codes and laws and everything, and then they really kind of like bring a lot of questions, like where do you go to search the GPT marketplace, like where you can find any of these GPTs, who's maintaining them, that they are built on their own code reinforcements and stuff. And I'm seeing a lot of local governments doing that, where they have like their own pre-trained model up there. And even if you don't participate, someone else can do that. So this is like a civic hacker who has actually, built a San Francisco GPT, and you can just go ask questions related to any of its open data, and it abstracts basically the need to share any of the CSV sets, and just gives you whatever the data that you're looking for, right? So this truly comes with a lot of arising issues regarding procurement rules, right? I mean, how are they going to be changing procurement rules? Are there any AI model disclosures that are going to be needed? Agencies need to be indemnified from any liabilities associated with any AI use, right? Like, what about bring your own AI, like implications, guardrails for AI usage, anything that our workforce uses beyond what is okayed by organizations? Also, like, there's a huge focus on data and privacy policies to be updated. The rules, regulations, accounts for AI usage. And then last but not the least, training, right? So Deborah, right after this talk, is going to be getting into that. But really the focus on AI training, the literacy, equity, reskilling, upskilling. I mean, it's really going to be a very important aspect of where we are going to be getting into. But really, at the bottom of it, to conclude the whole thing, is I equate all of us with Gary Kasparov. I mean, I remember like I was in college when this moment happened in '97, where like not only like this grandmaster, one of the best players of all times, like lost to IBM's Deep Blue. But it just showed how easy it was for Deep Blue to beat this person. And this was like one of the early alarms of like machines taking over. And I mean, we have been, as Homo sapiens, like for a long period of time, the most intelligent species on Earth, depending on, I guess, how you define intelligence. But really, there is the amount of time it takes for us to change and get more intelligent is a lot slower than what the machines are taking, right? So, I've shown this slide in the past, but really kind of like computers have been around us for just about 80 years. And with Gen AI, certainly they have the capability of speaking human language fluently, carrying out so many of these intellectual creative tasks, right? Like, who knew? I mean, all these illustrations that I used in my presentation are all created by AI. And I mean, I cannot imagine like the amount of time it would have taken me in maybe hiring someone to do this for me. And so, as much as it's actually a caution for anyone who just purely is an illustrator, but these things are changing, and we're at a crossing point where AI is a lot faster, a lot better at doing some of the things that we are used to doing as humans, right? But this really is not, any of like the first revolution that we have seen. Again, if you have attended any like some of my previous Gov talks, I've talked about some of these like major revolutions that we have went through, right? Like right from the agriculture, industrial, blah blah blah. All of these revolutions. What's different here is that the speed at which AI is taken, because these revolutions took centuries or even like at least decades between the World Wide Web to where we were with the smartphones. But this is all changing, and we are getting very much alarmed. So I've seen some folks who are extremely alarmed, skeptical about like, oh, just AI is going to take over everything, and some people are just convinced that like AI is never going to be able to take anything over, and humans are still going to be needed. Like my stand here is that AI will be the new experience, whatever it takes, and whatever it takes to replace that, right? So you can think about it where like most of the roles we are doing still requires a lot of domain knowledge. Like I said, AI still needs something to chomp and create. So that data is still going to be created by humans. The overall coordination will be done by humans. But think about legal compliance, data security, AI models as we function. We will need humans in the loop for sure. Going forward, human expertise is going to be needed to make some of these judgments, but it is going to be very, very important to make sure that we know how to use AI. And if we have not invested any time, or if you're not explored in trying to see how AI can be that augmenting factor for you, I mean, my request will be to start exploring that right away. So really kind of what I would leave you with is like, think of AI as our intelligent Sherpa, right? Leveraging all of these advanced climbing, challenges, whatever, but it is still something that would help us climb. And as public sector, it's not just enough for us to climb up there. We want everyone to go, up there with us. So that's one of the very important reasons why we want to make sure we do this cautiously and responsibly. So as we set off for this expedition, I just want to make sure we remember that every step forward, no matter how small, it still brings us closer to the summit. So having said that, thank you again for your time. And I'm equally curious and looking forward to the rest of the talks in today's GovTalks. Happy to answer any questions.